Young black man misses his interview to help an old man with a flat tire, unaware. He's the CEO. Before we dive into today's story, please press the subscribe button. Also, drop a comment from which city you're watching. We love hearing where our community is tuning in from. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. The streets of Riverside had never looked promising, especially not at dawn when the shadows stretched long and the broken streetlights flickered their last gasps of amber light. Damon Washington pulled his coat tighter as he navigated the cracked sidewalks, his polished shoes clicking against pavement still damp from the overnight rain. The air carried the familiar scent of his neighborhood: exhaust fumes, wet concrete, and the faint aroma of coffee from the corner deli, where construction workers gathered before their shifts. He could feel their eyes on him as he passed. A young, black man in a pressed suit walking through Riverside at 6 in the morning was an anomaly that demanded explanation. Court appearance, they probably assumed. Parole meeting. Anything but what it actually was. The most important job interview of his life. Damon adjusted his burgundy tie, the fabric smooth beneath his fingers. The suit wasn't expensive, charcoal gray from a discount store, but it fit him well enough to pass for something better. His reflection in the barbershop window revealed a man of 25, tall and lean with sharp cheekbones and determined eyes that his grandmother had always called serious, even as a baby. This morning, those eyes held a mixture of hope and carefully controlled anxiety. The silver tie clip glinted in the early light, his father's, one of the few things he'd left behind before disappearing when Damon was 12. It didn't match the suit perfectly, but it carried weight beyond its monetary value. Some things mattered more than appearances, though today, appearances mattered more than they ever had before. Sterling and Associates. The name rolled through, his mind like a prayer he'd been practicing for weeks. Downtown Chicago's glass cathedral of finance, where six-figure salaries were starting points and connections opened doors that talent alone never could. Damon came with neither pedigree nor trust fund, just a pristine GPA from Chicago State, 3 jobs held simultaneously through college, and a glowing recommendation from Professor Hamilton, the only instructor who'd looked past his zip code to see his potential. His phone buzzed against his chest. A text from his mother. "Praying for you, baby. Show them who you are. Love you always." He tucked the phone away, swallowing the tightness in his throat. The elevated train hissed to a stop at Washington Station, and Damon stepped onto the platform, with the quiet confidence he'd been practicing in mirrors for weeks. The morning air bit at his face, carrying the metallic tang of the city awakening. Commuters streamed past him, suits and briefcases, heads buried in phones, everyone moving with the purposeful urgency that downtown demanded. But something was different today. Heads tilted upward, phones lifted toward the sky, frowns creased, foreheads. Above the city's glass towers, clouds gathered in unnatural formations, dark and swirling with an energy that made the air feel electric. A sharp wind whipped down the avenue as Damon emerged onto the sidewalk, nearly tearing the leather portfolio from his grip. He clutched it closer, feeling the weight of everything inside. Extra resumes, meticulously researched company analysis, handwritten notes on potential interview questions, months of preparation condensed into those few sheets of paper. Through the crowd, he could see Sterling and Associates rising into the gray sky, its upper floors disappearing into the low-hanging, clouds like something from a dream. 8:27 a.m. The interview was scheduled for 9 sharp. Plenty of time, even accounting for the unusual weather that seemed to be rolling in faster than any forecast had predicted. The first raindrop hit his forehead like an icy warning. Then another struck his shoulder, followed by dozens more, within seconds. The sky opened with a fury that transformed the orderly morning into chaos. Rain didn't just fall, it attacked. Umbrellas turned inside out. Car horns blared as visibility dropped to nothing, and pedestrians scattered like startled birds seeking any shelter they could find. Damon ducked under the narrow awning of a flower shop, pressing his back against the cold brick as he watched the street transform into a river. Water cascaded from gutters, carrying debris and disappointment in equal measure. The storm wasn't just weather, it was biblical punishment, a test he hadn't prepared for. His phone screen was slick with water as he opened the rideshare app. No drivers available. He refreshed, tried again. Nothing. The storm had paralyzed the city's transportation network. His jaw clenched as precious minutes ticked away. 8:35, still manageable if the rain eased, but instead it intensified, turning the world into a watercolor painting left in the rain. Across the street, a woman slipped and fell, her briefcase skidding into the rushing gutter water. A man in an expensive coat cursed as the wind destroyed his umbrella. Everyone was struggling, but Damon's stakes felt higher, more personal. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was his future, dissolving in real time. He zipped the portfolio inside his coat, pulled his collar high, and stepped into the storm. Every step was a splash, his carefully polished shoes now sodden and slapping against flooded pavement. His shirt clung to his back, his tie twisted beneath his soaked lapels. But he pressed forward because this interview represented more than employment. It was validation, escape, proof that a kid from Riverside could belong in those glass towers. A taxi's brake lights flared ahead as it discharged a passenger. Damon sprinted through the ankle-deep water, his arm raised, shouting over the storm's roar. But just as he reached the curb, a tall white man in a camel overcoat shouldered past him and dove into the back seat. The door slammed, the car pulled away, spraying dirty water in its wake. Damon stood frozen in the street, water streaming down his face, fists clenched at his sides. He barely registered the delivery truck that swerved around him, its horn blaring. The casual dismissal, the assumption that the taxi belonged to someone else, the familiar sting of being invisible, it all crashed over him like another wave of the storm. But he kept moving because stopping meant surrender, and his mother hadn't raised him to surrender. The Sterling building was close now, its lobby lights glowing through the rain like a beacon. So close he could taste the opportunity, even as it seemed to slip further away with each flooded step. Then he saw the car. It was a Mercedes, sleek and black, the kind of vehicle that cost more than his family's annual income. But it sat helpless at the curb, its rear tire flat against the wet asphalt. The trunk hung open, revealing a spare that had been partially extracted but abandoned. Beside it, an elderly white man struggled with a jack that kept slipping on the rain-slick pavement. He appeared to be in his late 60s, his silver hair darkened with rain, his expensive suit wrinkled and soaked. His hands shook slightly as he tried to position the jack. Frustration and exhaustion etched across his weathered face. An umbrella lay forgotten beside him, bent and useless. Damon slowed, his pulse hammering against his ribs. Pedestrians hurried past on both sides of the street, eyes averted, shoulders hunched against the storm. A couple crossed to avoid the scene entirely, their designer shoes clicking quickly away from the inconvenience. The old man might as well have been invisible. The Sterling building gleamed in the distance, its glass facade reflecting Damon's fractured future. The interview that could change everything was slipping away with each second he stood here. Every rational thought screamed at him to keep walking, to choose his carefully constructed opportunity over a stranger's misfortune. But his mother's voice echoed in his memory, as clear as if she were standing beside him in the rain. You don't help folks when it's convenient, Damon. You help because it's who you are inside. That's what separates a man from just another person taking up space in this world. His jaw tightened, his grip on the portfolio loosened, and he stepped off the curb. "Sir," Damon called out, crossing the flooded street. "Let me give you a hand with that." The old man looked up. surprise flickering across his features as he took in this young black man in a business suit, approaching through the storm when everyone else had passed by. "I thought I could manage," he said, his voice thin, with exhaustion. "But this jack keeps sliding because the ground's so uneven." Damon set his precious portfolio on the car's back seat, said a silent prayer that it wouldn't suffer any more water damage, and shrugged off his suit jacket. He laid it on the wet pavement without hesitation, creating a barrier between his knees and the soaked asphalt. "You shouldn't be out here trying to do this in weather like this," Damon said gently, kneeling beside the car. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking the jack's position, adjusting the angle. The cold metal bit into his palms, but muscle memory took over. Summers spent in his uncle's garage in Riverside, learning to fix everything from flat tires to broken dreams. "You know your way around tools," the old man observed, watching Damon work with quiet appreciation. Damon smiled despite the circumstances, his fingers working the lug nuts loose. "My uncle never let me touch his Mustang until I could change a tire in under 8 minutes. The man chuckled, the sound barely audible, over the rain. "Smart uncle?" The clock in Damon's mind kept ticking, each second a small death to his carefully planned future. But he didn't rush the work. He finished properly, standing as the final lug nut clicked into place, wiping grease and rainwater on his soaked pants. The old man straightened, extending his hand. "What's your name, son?" "Damon. Damon Washington." The man's eyes sharpened almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something, curiosity, perhaps recognition, passing across his features. "You heading somewhere important, Damon?" Damon hesitated, looking toward the Sterling building where his interview waited, where his future had been scheduled to begin at 9 o'clock sharp. His watch read 8:52. "Yeah," he said finally, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside his chest. "The most important place I've ever tried to get to." The elderly man studied him for a moment longer, then moved toward the driver's door. "Get in," he said simply. "Let me give you a ride." The Mercedes rolled to a smooth stop in front of Sterling and Associates, its engine purring quietly beneath. The steady drumbeat of rain against the windshield. Damon stared through the passenger window at the building's imposing facade, his reflection ghost-like in the glass, soaked, disheveled, a far cry from the polished professional he'd planned to present. "You sure you want to go in there looking like that?" the old man asked quietly, his voice carrying no judgment, only gentle concern. Damon managed a tight smile, his throat constricted. "I have to try." The man nodded once, his fingers tapping, thoughtfully against the steering wheel. "Good luck, son." Damon pushed open the door, wincing as the rain immediately began to soak through his already damp clothes. Each step up the marble stairs felt heavier than the last, his shoes squelching, embarrassingly with each stride. The puddles reflected the building's lights like broken mirrors, fragments of the dream he'd carried for so long. Inside, the world transformed completely. The lobby existed in a different reality, warm, silent, pristine. Soaring ceilings stretched. Above gleaming floors, abstract sculptures commanded attention from spotlit alcoves, and the air carried a subtle fragrance that spoke of money and power in equal measure. This was a place designed to intimidate without saying a word. Damon hesitated just inside the glass doors, acutely aware of the water dripping from his clothes onto the immaculate floor. A businessman in an Italian suit glanced at him with barely concealed distaste. The receptionist behind the information desk whispered to her colleague, their eyes darting toward Damon with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. He forced himself to move forward, each step echoing louder than it should have in the cavernous space. The security desk stood like a checkpoint between his current reality and the future he dreamed of. Sleek white marble manned by a guard whose expression hardened the moment he registered Damon's bedraggled appearance. "Good morning?" Damon said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I'm Damon Washington. I have a 9 o'clock interview with Sterling and Associates Financial Division." The guard's fingers moved across his tablet with deliberate slowness, his eyes never quite meeting Damon's. "Yes, Mr. Washington," he said finally. 23rd floor, Financial Division." He paused meaningfully. "I should mention, they're very strict about punctuality." Damon's throat went dry. "I understand." The elevator ride was a special kind of torture, too fast, too quiet, and when the doors opened onto the 23rd floor, the space beyond felt like another level of exclusivity he wasn't meant to access. Rich hardwood floors stretched beneath. His feet, frosted glass partitions created a maze of important meetings, and carefully curated artwork lined the walls like trophies of corporate success. A receptionist in a sharp navy blazer looked up from her computer, her perfectly applied makeup unable to hide the surprise that flickered across her face when she saw him. Professional training kicked in quickly, smoothing her expression into neutral politeness. "Good morning," Damon began, clearing his throat and adjusting his grip on the water-stained portfolio. "I'm Damon Washington. I had a 9 o'clock appointment scheduled." She glanced at the clock behind her desk. 9:17. Her eyes softened with what might have been sympathy, but her posture remained firm with the weight of protocol. "I'm sorry, Mr. Washington," she said, her voice low and not unkind. "That would have been with Mr. Harrison. Unfortunately, he's already moved on to the next candidate. His schedule is quite tight today." The words hit Damon like a physical blow, even though he'd known they were coming. He'd felt his chance slipping away with every minute spent in the storm, every second devoted to helping a stranger instead of securing his own future. "I know I'm late," he said, struggling to maintain his composure. The storm was worse than expected, and there was an elderly gentleman stranded with a flat tire. "I couldn't just walk past him." She held up a gentle hand, glancing toward the closed office doors. "Mr. Washington, I do understand, but Mr. Harrison has very strict policies about timing." Damon's chest tightened, the reality of the situation settling over him like a weight. "Could you at least let him know I came, that I tried?" Something in his voice must have touched her because her professional mask slipped slightly, revealing genuine sympathy. He pulled one of his carefully prepared resumes from the portfolio, edges warped, corners smudged, but mostly legible. "I'll make sure he gets this," she promised, accepting the document with careful fingers. "I'll tell him you were here." Their eyes met for a moment, hers compassionate, his raw with the particular pain of watching dreams dissolve despite doing everything right. Then the moment passed, and Damon turned toward the elevators, his shoulders sagging under the weight of disappointment and the knowledge that sometimes good intentions aren't enough. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime that sounded almost mocking. He stepped inside, staring at his reflection in the mirrored walls, watching water still drip from his coat onto the pristine floor. His chest felt hollow, carved out by the morning's events, by the cruel mathematics of timing and circumstance. The ride down was silent, endless. The polished lobby greeted him again with its sharp edges and perfect lighting as he emerged. No longer an hopeful job candidate, but just another young man who'd discovered that the world didn't rearrange itself for good intentions. Outside, the storm had passed. Sunlight cut through the dissipating clouds, painting the wet pavement in shades of gold and possibility that felt mocking now. Damon stood on the steps, briefcase in hand, watching the city resume its normal rhythm as if his personal catastrophe was just another drop in the ocean of urban indifference. He didn't rage or cry. He just walked back into the city, back toward the train station, carrying his disappointment like a second skin, while the water from his ruined clothes gradually stopped dripping onto the sidewalk. 3 days later, Damon sat at the small kitchen table in his riverside apartment, the morning sun filtering through thin curtains and casting pale stripes across walls that had seen better decades. The radiator clanked its familiar rhythm, and somewhere down the block, a siren wailed, the soundtrack of his neighborhood's endless struggles. His laptop screen glowed with job listings, cursor blinking over applications he couldn't quite bring himself to complete. The leather portfolio sat beside him, its water stains now permanent reminders of the morning when his carefully constructed plans had dissolved in the rain. His suit jacket hung on a nail in the wall, the ghost of water damage still visible, across the fabric despite his best efforts to clean it. His phone buzzed against the table, his mother's face filling the screen. The same determined jawline he saw in the mirror, the same eyes that had watched him practice interview questions in their living room for weeks. "Baby, I've been thinking about you." Her voice carried its familiar warmth, cutting through his fog of disappointment. "Any word from that big company downtown?" Damon's mouth opened, the bitter explanation sitting on his tongue. How could he tell her about the storm, about choosing to help a stranger over securing his own future, about learning that sometimes doing the right thing still leads to failure? Before he could answer, another call buzzed through. Unknown number, Chicago. Area code. "Mom, I need to take this. Might be about work." "Of course, honey, go get 'em." He switched lines, his heart hammering with the faint hope that had somehow survived the past 3 days. "Hello? Good afternoon, Mr. Washington." A woman's voice, crisp and professional, with the confidence of someone accustomed to important conversations. "This is Sarah Mitchell, executive assistant to Mr. James Sterling. I'm calling to invite you to a meeting this afternoon at 2 o'clock if you're available." Damon's world tilted. He gripped the phone tighter, his voice barely keeping pace with his racing thoughts. "I'm sorry. Did you say Mr. Sterling, the CEO?" "Yes, sir. The meeting will be in the executive suite, 42nd floor. Will you be able to attend?" His heart pounded with a rhythm that felt dangerous, every instinct screaming that this couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake, some kind of administrative error or courtesy rejection dressed up in formal language. "Yes," he managed. "Yes, I'll be there." "Excellent. We'll see you at 2, Mr. Washington." The line went dead, leaving Damon staring at his phone in the sudden quiet of his apartment. For several heartbeats, all he could hear was the radiator's steady clank and his own pulse thundering in his ears. By 1:15, his suit was pressed as well as its battle scars would allow. His shoes gleamed with the kind of shine that came from an hour of careful attention, as if he could buff away the memory of that flooded street. The silver tie clip caught the light as he fastened it, his father's legacy positioned perfectly between his collar points. At exactly 1:45, a yellow cab pulled up in front of Sterling and Associates. The storm clouds were gone, replaced by a brilliant blue sky that stretched over Chicago like a promise. The sidewalk was dry now, the only evidence of the earlier chaos being the faint water stains on some buildings and the lingering smell of rain-washed pavement. Damon stepped out of the cab and looked up at the tower. It still rose imposingly into the clear air, still represented wealth and power beyond his experience, but today felt different. Today he wasn't chasing an opportunity. He'd been summoned to one. The lobby felt familiar now, its marble floors and hushed atmosphere no longer quite so intimidating. The security guard who had witnessed his previous embarrassment barely glanced up this time, scanning Damon's name on a list and handing over a black access badge with gold lettering that caught the light. "Executive level," the guard confirmed, his tone purely procedural. 42nd floor. Before we get into the heart of this story, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button to join the community and share your thoughts on the story. Damon walked toward the elevators, the badge solid and real in his palm, his reflection in the mirrored doors showing a man who still carried questions, but was no longer running from answers. As the numbers climbed higher than he'd ever been in this building, his chest tightened, not with fear, but with something else entirely. Anticipation, possibility, the electric feeling of standing at the edge of the unknown. When the elevator doors opened on the 42nd floor, Damon stepped into a world of quiet elegance. Sunlight flooded the space, reflecting off gleaming floors and expensive furniture. A professional woman named Sarah Mitchell greeted him, her smile genuinely warm. "Mr. Washington, I'm Sarah Mitchell. Mr. Sterling will see you shortly." Damon asked for water and waited in a leather chair that likely cost more than his rent. He sat facing a pair of tall, polished double doors, his heart beat a steady drum against the cool crystal glass in his hand. Hope, careful and tentative, began to unfold in his chest. The doors opened silently. "Mr. Sterling will see you now," Sarah said. Damon rose, his black access badge still clipped to his lapel, and entered. The office was impressive but understated, with large windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. A high-backed chair turned slowly, revealing the face of the man from the side of the road, the same intelligent eyes, the same silver hair. But here, in this space of authority, James Sterling was in complete command. "Mr. Washington," Sterling said, rising and extending a hand across his desk. "Good to see you again." Damon shook his hand, a firm, grounding grip. "I had no idea," Damon admitted. "That morning, I didn't know that I was the man who could have prevented your missed interview." Sterling finished with a slight smile. "That's exactly why it mattered." Sterling gestured for Damon to sit. He then moved to the window, hands clasped behind his back, looking out over the city. 43 years ago, he began, I stood in a Detroit warehouse trying to convince a man to take a chance on an idea. He said yes. It changed my life." Sterling returned to his desk and pulled out the leather portfolio Damon had left in the Mercedes. "You left this behind. I took the liberty of reviewing it." He opened the folder. "Your analysis is sophisticated. Your cover letter is honest, but none of that is why you're here." Damon's heart rate quickened. "It's not? I can teach skills." "Mr. Washington," Sterling said, his voice measured. "I can teach someone to read quarterly reports or build investment portfolios, but I cannot teach character." The words hung in the air. Most people would have kept walking that morning. The practical choice would have been to protect your own interests. You didn't. Damon remained silent, the memory of the rain and his choice clear in his mind. "You stopped," Sterling continued, his gaze direct. "You helped, not because you were being watched, but because it was the right thing to do. That morning you showed me everything I needed to know about who you are." "Mr. Sterling, I appreciate that more than I can express," Damon said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm not offering you the analyst position you originally applied for," Sterling said. Damon's chest tightened, but Sterling wasn't finished. "I'm offering you something different. You'll work directly with me as my executive assistant. You'll sit in meetings most people spend decades trying to access. It won't be easy, but you'll gain insights no textbook could provide." Damon stared at him, the magnitude of the offer a shock. "You want me to work for you? Directly?" The question was raw and vulnerable. Sterling smiled, his expression warm. "Because someone once believed in me before I'd proven I deserved it. And it changed everything." He extended his hand. Damon reached out, his fingers closing around Sterling's in a handshake that felt like stepping through a doorway into a future he'd never imagined. The rainstorm hadn't destroyed his opportunity. It had revealed it. In that moment, Damon understood that the most important journeys begin not when we chase our dreams, but when we choose to be the person we want to become, regardless of who's watching.